Okay.
Great.
All right, we are live.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome and call to order the September 16th, 2020 MAPC Executive Committee meeting to order. First order of business is the roll call. So I will do that at this time. And if you could just unmute so we can kind of expedite this. So Sharonda.
Aye.
John Barros. Keith Bergman, past president.
Present.
Karen Canfield, I think is absent. Adam Chapdelaine.
Present.
Bob Cohen.
Here.
Mayor Curtatone. Tom Daniel. I think you put your phone on mute, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. John DePriest.
Here.
Yolanda.
Here.
Sandra.
Here.
Mo.
Here.
Jared.
Present.
Tabor.
Here.
Hayes Morrison. Steve Olenoff. Caitlin.
Here.
George. Proakis. Jenny Raitt.
Here.
Vandana. Sam Seidel.
Here.
Steve Silvera.
Here.
Mayor Spicer. Juan Vega. Elaine.
Here.
Erin Wortman here. All right. Did I miss anyone that should have been called? Great. Okay, perfect. I hope everyone's having a great day. The first order of business is the approval of minutes from July 29th, 2020. I will entertain a motion or conversation at this time.
Motion
Bob?
to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Bob Cohen, second made by John DePriest. Any questions or comments before I call the roll? And I'm on two screens here. Attendees are on two screens, so just be verbal or put your hand up if you have a question. Great. All right, unmute please. Roll call required. Sharonda?
Aye.
I think John's absent. Keith?
Aye.
Karen, I think is absent. Adam?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone? Tom Daniel? John DePriest?
Yes.
Yolanda?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Mo?
Yes.
Jared?
Abstaining.
Okay. Tabor?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Perfect. Hayes? Steve Olenoff? Caitlin?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Vandana?
Is this for the meeting minutes?
Minutes, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, sorry, I joined late. Yes.
No. Glad to have you. You voted yes or abstain?
Yes.
Okay, great. Where am I? Sam?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Mayor Spicer? Juan? Elaine?
Yes.
Erin? Yes. Motion passes with 2 abstentions, and the 2 abstentions were Jared and Tabor, correct? Great.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, next order of business is the report of the treasurer. Sam?
Thank you, Erin, and hello to everybody. So in this month's treasurer's report, we're going to look at the June income statement. And June is the month that we close out the fiscal year. So a lot of administrative expenses get pushed back to June. And you'll see that as we go through some of the numbers. These include rent escalation and real estate taxes, things like that show up in June. These are not final. They will be final once the audit is complete. So you should note that. I think the biggest thing to note here is that our net income for June ended up at 0. It actually was running in the negative, but through the magic of Sheila and her intelligence and wizardry, she applied the contingency fund to get that number to 0. That's good. It resulted in an overhead rate of 124.5, which is above our 118. But that's fairly typical. That higher number is fairly typical for the June number because everything gets pushed back to that last month of the fiscal year. So that's not untypical. And if you compare it to the year before, we're actually doing better than we did the year before. So that's all very good. The other big takeaway from the June income statement is that we have zero net income for June, but if you look over the course of the full year, we're actually still running in the positive. We end up with 32,000 of net income. So that's a good indicator of the strong fiscal management of the team at MAPC. It's less than the 60,000 we budgeted, but given everything that we went through this last fiscal year, including COVID, the administrative expenses with paid time off, et cetera, that's pretty miraculous in my book. It ends up leaving us at an overhead rate for the year of 118.6%, which is 0.6 above what we had been approved for, 118, but it's better to be above than be below. If you're below, you have to pay money back. If you're above, you can cover it with things like the contingency fund, and I think that's probably the expectation. As I say, these numbers aren't final, but I think it's the belief of the staff, including Sheila and Rebecca, who I also had the chance to talk to briefly about it, that these numbers will be pretty close. We'll know them finally once the audit is complete. I would only add that we're entering FY21. We don't have any numbers for that yet, but that budget was constructed very conservatively. And so the expectation is that we're starting off a little bit better than even we expected for that. That concludes the treasurer's report. I would entertain any questions or comments or thoughts.
Motion to accept your report.
Is there a second?
Sorry, do I hear a second?
Sandra
Sorry.
has her hand raised.
Yep, we're just in the middle of a motion. So I see you, Sandra. John, I think I saw your lips moving.
I second.
Okay, motion made by Bob, second made by John. Sandra, I saw you. Question?
I was just going to say, great job, everybody. It sounds just amazing that we're just a little bit above, so we don't have to give any money back, but just, but not by much. So that sounds perfect. So thanks so much.
Yeah, I would
just say, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think at the end of the fiscal year, it's appropriate to congratulate and thank Rebecca and Sheila and Lourdes, as well as Sam, for all their efforts. This has been a difficult year. There are difficult years ahead. 21, I think we're pretty solid for 21. I think we're looking ahead to 22 possibly being a difficult year, but we're making our best efforts in that regard on all things. I would note I was in a race over the last half hour to get through 13 contracts on DocuSign, and I signed them all, and the contracts are coming in. The officers saw this at their meeting on Monday, where we presented a 2 or 3 month contract report. And after a slowdown in May and June, I think July, August, September have been strong. It doesn't always translate into cash because some of them are small, but we have seen a pickup in activity. We are no longer in the situation we were in earlier in the year where just everything had slowed down and it seemed like so many things were grinding to a halt. Business, if you will, has really picked up, and I think that's positive for the planning field and it's positive for MAPC.
Great.
I just add my own personal congratulations to the staff, Sheila, Rebecca, Mark, and Lourdes, and everybody else who's involved. These numbers are very good. Given where we were in March and April, this is a great June report. So thank you to all of them.
Great, thank you. Tabor, did you want to say something else or?
No, just I want to congratulate you guys for doing this. And this is the whole point of the, socking money away in the rainy day fund, et cetera. Having that extra cushion really did make the difference, obviously, this time, being able to meet our numbers despite the lack of income on a few of those items. So congratulations to everybody.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the treasurer's report? Seeing none, and I see the chat, so thank you, Heidi, for that. I will go through. It is never a problem being late. I'm just happy everyone's here. So roll calls required. Motion was made by Bob, second made by John. Again, there are numerous people on this call, and you are on 2 screens for me, just because it caps out at 24 per page. But I'm just going to call everyone, and if you could just unmute to expedite the vote, I'd appreciate it. So, Sharonda?
Aye.
John? I believe- Ooh. Keith?
Aye.
Karen, absent. Adam?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mayor Curtatone, I don't believe is here. Tom Daniel?
Yes.
John DePriest?
Yes.
Yolanda?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Mo?
Yes.
Jared?
Aye.
Tabor?
Yes.
Hayes? Steve? Olenoff?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Mayor Spicer?
Yes.
Juan? Elaine?
Yes.
Erin? Me? Yes. Motion passes. Thank you so much, everyone. Next item on the agenda is the report of the executive director. Mark?
Yes, thank you very much, Erin. I am going to try to switch to my executive director's report so I can actually be looking at it while we talk. And hopefully you can still see me. But I am looking at the report to highlight some issues. I'm going to give Rebecca a little bit of warning here that I'm going to skip the items that are related directly to our COVID response and ask her if she would, after I complete my go over, do a little bit of summing up of some of the agency's COVID response activities at the moment. Rebecca, will that be okay with you?
No problem.
Okay, very good. So it has been a big month in the arts and culture field. And the folks in that department really deserve a lot of credit for a couple of major rollouts over the course of the past couple of months. We did the Who's Public series, planning and placemaking for welcoming public spaces, heavily focused on our post-COVID world, which we are not quite yet in, but we know we're going toward, and figuring out how to reimagine public spaces in light of changing demand and needs. This was a 3-part series. It was very well attended. It brought in a lot of people to the MAPC table who had not previously been in. You can read the summary on the report. You can also go to the website and actually listen to any of the events. And I know that Annis and Emma in our arts and culture department would be glad to speak to any of you about it. It's entirely possible that some of you participated as well. Very excited at the premiere of Small Steps, Dances of Resilience, which was the latest and the final artistic contribution of our artist in residence, Hortense Gerardo, who I know many of you have met, in a partnership with one of our senior environmental planners, Darcy Schofield, who I know many of you know. These folks and their team envisioned Small Steps on climate change as a dance performance focused on resilience to climate change throughout the region. And when COVID struck and it became impossible to do in-person performances, it also became impossible to do in-person choreography and rehearsal, completely re-envisioned the project to one where the dances were performed at home or in parks. They were recorded. They went to Hortense. They went back and forth several times. She edited the entire performance and created an amazing documentary on how people are living with resilience in regard to COVID, in regard to police violence and inequity, and also in regard to the challenges that we are facing economically in our country as well. And climate change too was very much a focus of the performance. I know that many of you saw it on the 3 nights when it premiered. I'm really honored that we are being considered to have that enrolled in multiple international film festivals. This is not a role I ever learned anything about in planning school, but it's very exciting. And it's part of our commitment at MAPC to demonstrate the nexus between art and planning, between art and the real world. And I'm just so proud of the team for all the work they did. And they really, they intended to talk about resilience in this performance. And in fact, they acted resilient in this performance by making it happen. So I just want to draw attention to that and congratulate them and thank them. Moving on to clean energy, it is COVID response, but I'll mention it anyway. I'm very proud of the work that that team, public health and various others have been doing to implement the joint project we have with the Barr Foundation, the Mystic River Watershed Association, and MAPC to deal with issues of cooling during this very hot summer with vulnerable populations, often in high-risk communities. You can read more about that on the Extreme Heat Resources page. In addition to our work, substantial grants have been made available to 7 communities, mostly in our region, but also some outside of this region. It was really very quickly standing up a way to deal with a tremendous problem during the summer that we saw coming, but had to act on quickly because cooling centers and many of the other strategies that are commonly used for the elderly, the ill, et cetera, were no longer available. And new means needed to be found to deal with those questions. And so they've been doing that, and I'm very proud of it. In data services, I want to note that in July, it's really data services and municipal collaboration, as well as our MetroCommon staff at Strategic Initiatives, released a diversity deficit, municipal employees in Metro Boston, which took a very thorough and imaginative look at municipal employees through census data to determine diversity across age, race, and gender, and also make recommendations about how to improve that. Saliki Flingay, who is no longer at MAPC, but was at the time, completed our report, and Adam Chapdelaine, Manager Chapdelaine, and Mayor Spicer were both on the panel that we had to release the report and begin a conversation about efforts to address some of the issues that are involved in that. MetroCommon, this will be one of the issues that's focused on in MetroCommon policy recommendations. So we are not leaving the issue with this report. It's only a start. Some might consider it a little in the weeds, but I want to point out that the land use, the regional land use allocation model has now gone live. It is still in beta testing. It is a product that we developed together with Urban Sim. It is funded in part by both EEA and DOT, and it will provide some incredible capabilities to MAPC in terms of land use modeling and also improve the quality of the land use inputs into the regional transportation model at CTPS. It is yet another indicator of how MAPC is a leader in the region and in fact throughout the country on regional land use modeling and issues related to land use generally. And I want to congratulate Tim. I know he's on the call, and his entire team, Jesse and others, for the tremendous amount of work that went into getting the project this far. The Digital Municipal Collaboration Project is actually mentioned in the ED report, but it's one that Tim and Ryan are going to report on shortly. We have a tremendous number of municipal vulnerability plans and hazard mitigation plans that we are doing, and I want to draw particular attention to the fact that we completed both for Bellingham and Franklin jointly. It's our first time doing these plans, both of the plans together and for multiple communities. And I hope it will not be the last. We always encourage communities to look at hazard mitigation issues and climate change preparation issues across municipal boundaries, since the forces that we deal with have no recognition of municipal boundaries. So congratulations to Martin, his team, and others, the folks at Data Services and Environment, for completing the work in those 2 towns, Bellingham and Franklin. I'm going to leave the issues on legislative matters for a little later because I know that Lizzie is going to address them. I want to note one item actually from the June report. It's not here, but it relates to the open space, to the, Open Space and Residential Design, the OSRD plan that we are in the process of completing for the town of Linfield. LOIs from our land use planning staff presented on this to officers the other day, It's a very innovative strategy related to OSRD. It's in a community that we really see as an exemplar of what we are trying to accomplish in somewhat less developed suburban communities or in maturing suburbs, in terms of encouraging future housing production, but doing so in ways that preserve open space and that are consistent with smart growth principles. I want to thank not only Ella, but also the staff in Linfield for being forward-looking and progressive on these issues. We still have further to go. We're not completely at the finish line on this one, but it is very different from your usual OSRD plan, and I really think it's an indication of innovative work at MAPC. Tremendous amount of work continues in economic development to help small businesses to resist and recover from the COVID pandemic. You'll see at least four different projects that are all related to this in the ED report. Some are specific as our strategic plan for Dorchester Bay. Others are very broad as for our assistance to 21 communities to successfully secure almost $5 million for micro enterprise grants from DHCD, with the lead community being Yolanda's community, Ashland. I think I will close on the transportation side by noting something, by noting a couple of initiatives that are general work related to our general missions of regional collaboration and smart growth, but also somewhat specific in terms of addressing COVID issues. The Shared Streets Initiative is the MassDOT program that provides funding to individual cities and towns for their for complete streets work, for work related to outdoor dining, for repurposing areas for bicycle traffic, etc. And we have been doing a lot of supportive work with individual communities to help them to prepare applications. The demand for this program has been so great that we are basically expecting it to be doubled. I think there's another $10 million that's been allocated. I'm not sure I got that number quite right. And we're very proud of that work. I'm also very proud, and I've mentioned this before, of the Urgent Taxi grant program, where we, working with Mass Development, are releasing money to cities and towns so they can hire taxi companies to perform urgent services in response to COVID. Again, Mass Development has also doubled that grant amount. And I just signed contracts today, I believe, for 13 additional communities to participate in that program, and regional transit authorities. For those of you from the Metro West area, we did a $176,000 contract with the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. Very proud to try and provide services throughout the Metro West area in this time of need. I think I'll close there and turn it over to Rebecca to talk about some of our specific COVID response activities.
Great, thank you, Mark. You did cover a lot of our kind of recovery focused activities. So I will just focus on really the work that we continue to do to provide coordination across our municipalities and with the administration. We have been focusing particularly over the last month or so on what I will unfortunately call, the red communities. If you've seen the administration's kind of new map where they're looking at incidents of COVID in communities, but really the communities that continue to be hard hit. We've been scheduling calls and working with those communities to, particularly working with Lizzie Wyant, Mark Fine, and Barry Keppard, to come up with strategies to really think about what are other ways and supports that they need to try to help to mitigate infection in those communities. So we've come up with a number of strategies and are currently negotiating with the administration to try to figure out how to provide those supports. Everything from increased community health workers, looking to try to better coordinate the contact tracing system between the state and localities. And a contract I actually just signed today where a number of communities in the Metro North region are actually looking to do media buys in Spanish language media to try to increase educational efforts in those communities about the risks of COVID and how to mitigate risk. So those continue apace. We're also working with communities to really try to come up with a better set of metrics to utilize around school closures. The current metrics, if you've seen them, are very sensitive metrics. And so we'll see, and I will warn you, you will see communities, going from white to green to yellow to red and then back again very quickly. And so we're trying to look across a host of metrics to suggest what might be successful there. And then lastly, advocacy around the current available CARES funding. There's still one more round to go to make sure that that funding is really directed towards the communities that have the most incidence of disease and most need, as well as continued advocacy with all of our municipal partners at the federal level to try to get some sort of funding bill out of Congress. So I'm happy to take any questions, but a quick roundup of the work that we've been doing.
Rebecca, I had a question. Well, first of all, it sounds like you all are doing incredible work. So I'm really glad that you all are doing that. One thing that has been one sort of a kind of personal experience that I kind of zoomed out. I was like, I wonder if this is happening to other people, and partially causing some of the high positive rates in certain communities is the long lag time between testing. So, is that being addressed? And it varies. I've gone to, for example, Whittier, and it took 7 days. And now I go to Dot House Health, and it takes 3 days. And I think, if you're thinking about just the amount of time in between those tests, if you're having those 5 extra days, it's 5 extra days to possibly spread COVID. And so I'm wondering if that's being addressed, and if we're really trying to get more rapid tests, or at the very least get more 48-hour tests in some of these red communities.
Yeah, I would say that really varies site to site. I think some of the red communities would say that they do have sites that are having very fast turnaround. I know, for example, Revere and Chelsea, and John can speak to this. I think if you're looking for a fast test, I might suggest going there. We're hearing very good things about the turnaround, but I think there continues to be inconsistency across testing sites, as well as, very fine-grained issues in terms of the coordination of testing sites with public health departments, as well as with the CTC. And so, really making sure when those positives come up, those are getting put into Maven or being reported to the community so that they can do that important contact tracing. So really trying to bring together the public health directors with the folks at the state. Barry and Mark have been focusing on that to try to continue to improve the levels of coordination there.
Hey, Rebecca, Robert Cohen, I have a question.
Yes.
So when we look at the maps that the governor's office publishes, the white, green, yellow, red, is there any information also about the relation to unemployment? Because Massachusetts is crazy to sound, we're #1 in the nation with the highest unemployment rate. Is that spread equally amongst the state, or is that focused in a certain areas?
No, that unemployment, unfortunately, is not, spread equally across the state. And, you'll see the communities, you're right, that are in the red are the same communities that are experiencing the highest levels of unemployment. I think the last time I looked, it was Lawrence and Revere 1 and 2, but, it is the same communities, that we see many systemic issues, are the same communities that continue to have the higher incidence. And those are the same communities with the highest number of essential employees, the same communities with the highest number of folks that might not be eligible for unemployment because of immigration status or other issues, as well as the same number of communities that see crowded housing, where you can continue to see spread, within families. So it's all the same systemic issues, and I think the map does actually really highlight that.
Rebecca?
I will ask if I could, I'll say something about the testing issue and then see if Tim has anything to add on the unemployment question. On the testing issue, we were just discussing it. We had a meeting of our COVID response team this morning, and in regard to high-risk communities, and we're discussing again the issue of the disparity of testing results. I mean, I think the thing we need to just acknowledge, Jared, is it's a mess. It's a mess here in Massachusetts. It's a mess in other parts of the country. Not only do we not have enough testing, but we have these wide variations in response time everywhere in Massachusetts and everywhere in the United States. One of the positive things is it does seem like the Stop the Spread sites that the state has stood up, including some of those that Rebecca mentioned. Those are really kind of our frontline testing sites to deal with high-risk communities, and they are doing turnarounds fast. So there is more consistency there than there are in other places, and that's positive because that is sort of the point of the spear in some ways. The unemployment issues, we've had a robust conversation among staff on this. slightly odd situation where the disparities that you see on a micro level about areas that have a lot of higher unemployment seem to not be mirrored at a state level, because you would expect Massachusetts to be low and instead it's high. And Tim, I don't know if you, from your analysis, and we haven't done a formal analysis, but I know folks in data have been thinking about it. If you have anything to add on this point, it is a very strange anomaly.
Yeah, it's I think, you know, we're seeing challenges up and down the employment spectrum, from lots of service jobs that have been affected, as well as lots of office and administrative positions that have where folks are laid off because people aren't reporting to the office. We also, when comparing nationally, we noticed that some of the sectors that have been less affected by shutdowns are less represented in Massachusetts, like manufacturing, for example, agriculture, extractive industries. Those sorts of things are less susceptible to shutdowns, and so therefore, and we don't, those end up being sort of more resilient and having fewer layoffs during this period, and we don't have very many of those industries. So it's the economy here seems to be very sensitive to it, but it is an issue that we'll be looking at more. And just in relation to the initial question, the correlation between communities who are at high risk, frontline workers, unemployment rates, and a pre-existing housing insecurity is very, very strong. And that's one of the arguments we made in some material we prepared for the Attorney General's office related to the cases about the eviction moratorium, which has been, as you know, has been challenged in court. So we've been working with the AG's office to provide information to them about why it's an important housing and public health measure.
Thank you, Tim.
Question, Rebecca? Are we looking, or is anybody tracking the variation in quality among the testing sites and in the communities? Because there seems to be some variety of quality among the various testing labs, and there have been some issues in Massachusetts with respect to that.
Yeah, no, we are not tracking that at kind of the level. I mean, the data and the sites change very quickly. You know, there is a map that the state has put out, and I mean, it's actually a very robust resource if you're looking for a site. But you know, I mean, we have a mix of private, public, you know, municipally set up, state set up, federal. There's a whole mix of sites out there. You know, we've really been mainly focused on how are we getting supports into the communities that need them the most.
Okay, thanks.
Rebecca or Mark, I'm particularly concerned about this being it's a health issue, and we do have a group at MAPC that does a lot of work on this. And it seems that unfortunately we are what would be considered nationwide more of a health-oriented state, but we have, you know, an abysmal record so far in this response to the pandemic, and you know, no better than the rest of the country, really, in some ways. Going back to school, we seem to have 360 different solutions to how do we open, and you know, what's safe, what isn't. Is there any direction from the state level on getting to a solution? I mean, I know we go through all the we get all the funding for active shooter drills and for making sure that the fire and safety people are well equipped for everything else. But it seems like what we were missing was a comprehensive plan statewide. And obviously, you know, there was some information we couldn't have known, but there, you know, between the schools and the Mass Health and the Board of Education, right up front in the middle of July, they were, you know, disagreeing on how this was going to happen. And I'm not so sure if it was the unions that won out, but you know, eventually things seem to go in a different direction than health. And I'm just thinking, if this isn't the end, we're not going to get a vaccine by, you know, the end of the year. What do we do for the next year if we don't have a final solution to this? Is there any reason that we shouldn't expect some kind of funding for a study that MAPC could, in fact, put together for, if not our region, the state? I don't know if that's something that's been discussed or not, but it seems like we're just crying out for a solution here.
Well, Tabor, I think your question covers a wide a wide set of topics, all within the COVID realm, but it's still a pretty wide set of topics. I don't think we can fully discuss it now, although I'd be glad to continue that conversation afterwards with you. I think that, look, the folks at the state level, including the governor himself and the lieutenant governor, they're working basically 24/7 on this. I think they have strived to be data driven in their response. We don't see any of the incendiary talk or the lurching from one side to the other that we see in some other states. The health community has been brought deeply into the decision-making process, and the state does issue guidance on a wide variety of issues and provide a lot of resources to cities and towns and to others to try and address some of these issues. At the same time, I think the governor's perspective is one of offering, I guess I would use the word sort of light guidance, general guidance, and really trying to have the individual communities make their own decisions. And while that is a circumstance that we at MAPC often approve, I think that at least on the staff level here, we have a somewhat different perspective. We would rather see tighter guidance from the state, somewhat more forceful, somewhat more uniform, perhaps regional approaches, because there are differences even within this small state. Geographically, there are vast differences in terms of impact. And thus far, that hasn't been the way that they have chosen to go. The numbers are much, much better than they were before. We have not seen the kind of reopening spike. We've seen some of it, but we haven't seen anywhere near what we've seen in some of the southern states and even in California. That said, 9,000 people have died here, which is approximately the same number that has died in Germany. So, the results are troubling. And I think what we're trying to focus on right now at MAPC is not so much an overall retrospective study on how it was done, because honestly, I don't know that we would have the expertise for that. But we are really focused on how are you going to deal with the issue in the high-risk communities come fall and winter. Because we know, we have two examples now. We have the first example from the spring, and then we have the example from basically the last month. We know where the high-risk communities are. We know where the largest number of infections tend to be. And we know that we have to stand up ways of dealing with that during the fall and winter. And we are working very hard on trying to get them to be aggressive and prescriptive and direct, and to provide funding for assistance in those communities. And even in surprise communities, it may happen, and they always happen. On the schools thing, I'll be very brief on this. It's sort of the same thing. I mean, the state provided guidance. They provided it over and over again. Clearly, the governor has a perspective that most folks should go back to school. Most kids should go back to school. Some of that is happening, but I think by and large, not only the teachers union, but many parents have decided that that's just a little bit of a bridge too far for them. And I think one of the problems is that this means schools are spending a lot of money and spending a lot of time and doing a lot of work to reopen for what may be, in some circumstances, relatively limited attendance, which is difficult from a spending perspective, from a teaching perspective, but also may end up being a little better from an infection perspective. I think, in all honesty, what we have is probably going to be the administration's continued perspective, which is light guidance based on data as they see it, updated frequently, but leaving most of the decisions to the localities. And as I said, there are values to that, and there are ways in which it is very, very challenging.
I have really more feedback on shared streets. So moving into a different area. Cambridge has implemented shared streets in certain parts of the city. It's a wonderful concept. I think the communication and the outreach has been pretty lacking. And I don't know if that's a Cambridge only issue or if MassDOT could provide more money or some guidance about the best way to tell the citizens of Cambridge or any community what this is, how it's supposed to work, particularly for the drivers. I think, well, also for the walkers and the bikers. I think they don't really understand how that new street is supposed to work, how it's supposed to operate, what rights they have to the paved part of the street. And the drivers I think in some cases, just look at it as an obstacle course. They can drive around these cones and, you know, have a little chicane or something.
And we'll take that back. Eric is not here today. Eric Barras is doing a hike in the country with his 80-year-old father to celebrate Dad's birthday. So he's off today, but we'll take that back to him and to Sarah, and we'll try and get back to you on it.
Okay, and then a last comment. I saw an email from MAPC on a discussion on public monuments, and personally, it's a fascinating topic in my mind, and I'm glad you guys are looking at it. It's not without controversy, it's not without issue, but it's a great topic to talk about. So,
well, that's why we do all the controversial topics, Sam. So, you know, we had put that on hold at the beginning of COVID, and decided to do the public spaces activity instead. And we figured no one would pay attention to monuments during a pandemic. And now the whole country is talking about monuments. So we quickly pivoted and went back, and we decided we'll do that project too. And this is a 3 or 4 part session that's starting, which I very much hope members of the executive committee will participate in. It's going to be fascinating. And there are some excellent speakers with deep experience.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
I think that concludes the executive director's report.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who asked questions and participated in that discussion. And thank you, Mark and Rebecca, for such a thorough update. And please view the chat for other members giving recommendations on articles or info on that monument sessions that was just discussed. More information is getting plugged in there in the chat. So next up on the agenda is the report of the legislative committee. So I'm going to call on Keith, who is our legislative chair, to kind of tell us what's going on.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks very much, Erin. The legislative committee did meet last Wednesday. We not only reviewed what's still ongoing in the current session of the legislature, but we even deigned to think about begin to think about what priorities, legislative priorities might be for the upcoming session, even though the current legislature would probably still be meeting when new bills would need to be filed for the new session. So I saw Leah online. I'm not sure who else from staff is going to lead our update, but I would.
I'll start us off, Keith.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much for situating us. I will step in for our fearless leader, Lizzie, who is braving the back to school adventure today. So really excited to talk with you about where we're at in the legislative session and this most unusual of years. As Keith mentioned, the legislature normally in the second year of a 2-year session will end their work on formal bills on July 31st. And this year they opted to extend their work until the end of the legislative session on January 5th. So they have given themselves more time to contemplate the budget, to be able to consider any allocations that come from the federal government, and to continue work on a number of bills that are in conference committee and being discussed between the two branches. What we're going to do is give a quick overview of kind of where we're at with the budget, a little discussion of where we're at in terms of looking towards next session, and talk through some of the priorities in the different conference committee bills. We're going to do this really quickly so we can get to some discussion too. With the budget, the legislature voted to do an interim budget through the end of October. This is in the same format that they've used for extending 1 month at a time. They just extended it for 3 months. So come that deadline, we anticipate that their options are either to do another interim budget or to put forward a full budget. And both branches and the governor have committed to the local aid numbers that were released, I think it was last month now, from the Division of Local Services. So if you have questions about that, please let us know. But there is at least that bit of certainty to work with. We are still working very closely with legislators to highlight the need for DLTA, especially now, as there's increasing technical questions from municipalities and opportunities to work together. So we're continuing those conversations and appreciate anything you can do to continue in your conversations with legislators to highlight the importance of the assistance work. Yeah, so that's where we're at with the budget. And then normally this is the time of year where we'd really be talking exclusively just about next session, but we are still sort of in that balancing moment between the current session and looking forward to the new session. We are doing a lot of conversations within MAPC and with our external stakeholders, and are really appreciative of the collaboration with the community engagement team, who's also doing a lot of outreach to external stakeholders for Metro Common, and really combining some of those efforts as we work to strengthen our existing relationships and grow some new ones within the region, to really get an idea of where some of the struggles are that we need to be focusing our attention and keeping equity and economic recovery centered in a lot of our discussions. I will pause there to see if there are any questions on budget and so that initial take on where we're going. Great. Okay, I will push forward and give a quick summary of the climate bill, and then I'm going to turn to Diego to talk a little bit about IT bond and economic development and a couple other proposals. So on the environmental bills, I just want to remind folks that at the beginning of session, we had all been very, very hopeful that there was going to be new funding dedicated towards climate. That is still possible, but we're not exactly sure where that's going to land. The governor had put forward a proposal for increasing the deeds excise fee, and the House had put forward a bond proposal. Both of those bills are live, but they haven't moved in a while. So we're sort of watching those and weighing in and really emphasizing that that's something we're going to need to continue to work on. Both branches, though, did advance legislation that would change our target for 2050 to be net zero. And includes workforce development focus. It includes buildings and housing focus that really builds on some of the work that's been done in Cambridge and Boston and some of the other municipalities on building energy. And they also are looking at appliance energy. So those are just some of the quick hits on climate. That bill is in conference committee. Many of the conferees are the same that debated the bill 2 years ago. So we're definitely building off of those past relationships and working together with them to weigh in. So that is where we're at with climate. I will turn it over to Diego.
Thanks, Leah. I'll only talk about the economic development bond bill since I know we're a little over time. So the big takeaway from that is both the House and Senate version do include the housing choices legislation text that the governor filed. So cautiously optimistic that it'll make it through. Both the House and Senate tackle the criticism about affordable housing and tenant protection rights differently. So the Senate, for example, makes inclusionary zoning one of the provisions that will be eligible for the new voting threshold under housing choices. It also includes language that would allow eviction sealing records eviction records to be sealed every 3 years or after 3 years. Although we're pushing for language that makes it a little stronger, that will make that eviction sealing automatic instead of having to file for that motion. The House, on the other hand, does include language on right of first refusal, and they do include mediation language between tenants and landlords that might be facing eviction. We at MAPC are pushing for right to counsel pilot program, which unfortunately was not included in any versions of the bill. And just really quickly, the other piece that is great in the economic development bond bill is that there's $10 million for municipal and regional planning grants, which we think complement DLTA and other state programs really well. Definitely something that a lot of communities will benefit from. And we're glad that both are funded at $10 million in both versions of the House and Senate. There's a summary that I think might have been sent around, but We have a summary that goes over some of the other bills, including economic development in more detail. So definitely, take a look at that and let us know if you have any questions. But I'll turn it over to Kasha now, since it's a little bit of a tag team today, to talk about transportation bond bill.
All right, thank you, Diego. So the House passed their version of the bond bill back in early March, and at the same time they passed a transportation revenue package, which is very exciting. The Senate, however, has chosen not to take up the transportation revenue package, but when they took up their version of the bond later this summer, they did include some of the policy provisions in the House's transportation revenue package. And so that includes the creation of a congestion commission, a new means tested fare program at the MBTA, as well as some new TNC data sharing requirements. Shout out to Tim Reardon for his persistent work on some of that language. So some common elements in both the House and Senate version of the bond bill that we're pretty excited about: $50 million for the Complete Streets program, and both the House and Senate have some interesting municipal grant programs that promote access to transit, help electrify buses, reinvigorate the public realm, some good walking and biking programs. The Senate also included regional ballot initiatives in their version of the bond bill. And even though it was a little bit of a fight in the end, that provision remains in the bill, and we're excited to see that made it through. This bill has been in conference committee for the past 2 months now, I think, and no good sense of timing as to when it'll move. I know that the T, I'm sure you're all aware, the T is facing a pretty significant budget deficit, and while the bond certainly wouldn't fix that, it would help move some programs forward. So I think we're still wait and see on timing. Unless folks have any questions for myself or Leah or Diego, I'm happy to turn it back over to Keith.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for giving us time on the agenda to tell you a little bit about where the legislature is at. And I know we'll be back in meetings later in this fall to talk a little bit more about next session. So that was just a teaser today.
Thanks so much to our great staff and leadership and all of you. It's a momentous year. It still is. On the Hill, and I really appreciate how important MAPC's role is with Mark and Rebecca's leadership and the rest of the staff. And I'm glad you're there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Keith, and thanks, legislative staff. I echo Keith's comments. I really appreciate it. And I know there's a lot of work to do, but I just love in my lifetime to get to majority versus supermajority on some of these things, right? So anything could happen. So I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm going to celebrate when that happens. Okay. So next up on the agenda is a little bit of a change. We're going to on the amended agenda, we see at the top that we're going to get a new project update from the digital services team. So Tim and Ryan, instead of a Metro Common update. So I will turn the floor over to Tim. I think you're on page 2 with me, but
yep.
Oh no, you're right there. You're right there. All right, Tim, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I'm Tim Reardon, the Director of Data Services at MAPC, and joining me today is Ryan Kelly, who's our Digital Services Manager. He's been with the agency for about 1.5 years after working in Rhode Island in both state government and nonprofit organizations, and has done a lot with digital services to work on the applications that we build that help share information like Trail Map or collect information from municipalities like Mass Builds, as well as lots of support to MAPC planning projects. And what I want to do today is talk about a new initiative called Digital Municipal Collaboration, which we've been working on for the last 9 months or so, and that we're going to continue over the course of this coming fiscal year. And what I'll do, sort of introduce you to some of the rationale for it, and then I'll pass over to Ryan to talk about the specific activities that we're doing and opportunities to actually work with municipalities. So if we go to the next slide, we as you all know, we already have a municipal collaboration program that's dedicated to helping municipalities both save money and save time and make smarter purchases by working together with MAPC's assistance on things from fire trucks to asphalt to streetlights, bike racks, and now paint for striping bus lanes. So there's all sorts of things that we're buying. And the question that we have is, well, can we use it to help municipalities not only buy new technology, but also to adopt smarter digital practices? And our vision for this, as we describe on the next slide, is that we believe that there's an opportunity to help cities and towns buy technology, that is generally software as a service, and in doing so to adopt better practices for using that technology. And through that work, we think we can help make local government services more effective and more equitable. So what is it that we mean by that, and how is it that we think that can happen? Well, as far as effective goes, what we know as is sort of a cornerstone of what we do in data services, that we feel that better data can yield more effective government. And by making smarter technology purchases, we can help cities and towns be more effective and serve their constituents better. By starting with user needs, we can get products that are actually more responsive to what both city and town staff as well as constituents need, rather than just sort of saying, okay, well, let's go to technology vendors and see what they're offering and then make a decision based on what they're already selling. We also know that by automating some of the processes that are currently done on paper or manually or other things, it allows staff to actually focus on the things that really matter, so that they're spending more time evaluating the quality of the permit submission rather than submittal, rather than just making sure that all the paper is in the right order. We also know that cities and towns will work better if they own and have access to their own data. One of the projects we've been working on over the past few years is collecting zoning data from cities and towns. And we've talked to some who say, well, we don't actually maintain our own zoning data. It belongs to a vendor that maintains that for us, and you'll have to ask them for it. And that's really problematic when our own cities and towns don't even own the data that's really central to their planning work and their operations. And finally, the use of data standards will allow municipalities to compare notes and track progress on what they're buying, what they're paying for it, and how effective it is. And then we also think that by adopting modern practices, we can also make local government more equitable by starting with user needs. Go to the next slide. By starting with user needs, we can center the needs of users in the development process and serve the community better. Standard contracting standards that make sure that technology providers provide access to data in standardized formats, can improve access for people with disabilities. It also yields more informed community engagement. And then finally, a more open and transparent procurement process can open up opportunities for local and minority-owned vendors, not just the big, oracles and major software players. But there's a lot of small startups doing technology in our region, and because of the way that technology procurement happens in cities and towns right now, it's very hard for them to break in. And it's very hard to support the development of those local and minority-owned businesses. And so through a better procurement process, we think we can actually help those communities to grow their businesses and develop well.
Please hold.
So what we're doing is a project that we're calling Digital Municipal Collaboration. We're in the startup phase now, about 9 months in, using some funding from the Executive Discretionary Fund. And there's really 3 main tasks in this that Ryan's going to describe. Number 1 is to do some research to understand what municipalities need, to work with our municipal collaboration partners to conduct at least one collective procurement, and then to develop a business plan to understand how we might continue this as a self-sustaining set of services that MAPC could provide to its municipalities over the coming years. So to describe those in more detail, I'll turn it over to Ryan, and he can give you some details on what we're doing.
Starting with the user needs is important in our purchasing and also for this project. Both in listening and talking to towns, and we're always open and happy to talk about what IT projects or purchases towns are interested in pursuing. We've also been scouring through budgets to get a better understanding of what has been purchased, but also going through Zoom calls and Zoom meetings and trying to listen and hear that way. And we've heard a lot of the similar questions, both budgeting questions, but also about what's good, what is actually working. So we hope to leverage that both in the purchases we make and the information we share. So our next step is to actually buy something. So we want to issue some collective procurements for technology municipalities need. There's a current opportunity from now until October 15th. The Community Compact IT grant is open. And it is a municipal-led grant, and that encourages some multi-jurisdictional applications. So we think it'd be a really good opportunity to use some of these funds on projects that are regional or collaborative in nature. We look back on the previous applications, and certainly there's a lot of these. These are the top 4 around networking infrastructure, broadband, which has only increased since COVID, licensing permitting applications, and really front door applications for residents are very popular and in need, document record management, and also financing and accounting systems, which is an opportunity that's kind of near and dear to MAPC at this time. For us to do this work, we're also in need of some full finance system, but really related to our procurements and some of our municipal collaboration procurement work. We think there's maybe an opportunity for us to do a collective procurement around procurement software. So we had issued a request for information in July and received 7 different vendor responses that vary in different approaches, and hopefully can pursue that in the coming months to see if we can do this as a collective thing and not just benefit us and the work we need to get done, but also communities. I think it's that procurement software is core to that data question and answering some of these core things that are really lacking in the space about what was purchased, how much it was purchased, and what's working, what's not working. One of the other potential opportunities that comes from this is not just being the person that can buy more things, but can we also add in the customer review and an ability for that information to be shared? Can we facilitate more of the learning across the region? And that's with something, a platform, something like Yelp or Angie's List that can really share not just what was purchased, but did it work and how did it work? I think this is an opportunity for collaboration with partners, and certainly looking for others in the space that are willing to talk and share their experiences and spread that information that I think is really needed to make better decisions and not just more of them. So always happy to talk. Please reach out if there's any IT needs or IT projects that you know are going on in the region or in the state. We're happy to talk and think through, and certainly looking to purchase and help towns purchase some IT and digital needs.
I'll just say that over the coming weeks, Ryan's going to be working to reach out to communities through sub-regional coordinators and other venues to continue the conversations about what cities and towns need, and also who might like to be involved in this Community Compact IT grant program. So we're happy to take any questions if you want, or we can move on depending on.
Great, Tim and Ryan, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I have a question for Tim. Tim, I applaud the effort of wanting to push contracts to smaller firms. I'm not a fan of Larry Ellison and not wanting to give Oracle any more money. With that said, how do you gauge reliability and the ability and bandwidth for small companies to deliver, since in the tech world there is constant consolidation? When someone builds a better mousetrap, either Oracle or Amazon or Microsoft, they buy it. And if it's not a better mousetrap, there's a high failure rate, and a lot of these small startup tech companies go out of business. So I know we don't want to always go with the big boys or the big girls, or how do you avoid making sure you're making a right decision and going to not spend more money down the road because the company went out of business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and part of this goes back to the issue of data standards and systems that can be coupled together. And Ryan, I think Ryan would be happy to talk with you about this at length, but I think part of it is saying by specifying data standards and how things work, it allows municipalities and other customers to swap in and out different software tools if a vendor goes belly up, because I know what I'm putting in and I have specified formats for what's coming out, and somebody just has to provide the software to do that. The problem with a lot of the big, the software that municipalities use is that the data formats themselves are proprietary. So once the cities and towns information is in there, it can never come out. And so by moving towards a model where we're using data standards, it actually it'll make us less reliant on an individual vendor, because we own and maintain the data, and it's maintained in formats that everybody can access. So if we want to move to another vendor, or if a vendor ends up going out of business, all of that information remains available and legible to cities and towns for them to move on with.
All right, great, thank you.
Great. Sandra.
So just to clarify, it sounds like a great project, but at this point, you're not looking to involve municipalities yet. You're still studying how to go about this. Is that the case? You're not doing a pilot project or anything like that?
Ryan, do you want to?
We certainly want to engage and talk to municipalities about their needs for sure. We definitely would love to do a purchase if it's ready. If we want to use the IT compact, we'd love to do a collective purchase at this time. If a municipality or group of municipalities are ready to do that, we think those areas, those 4 topic areas seem to come up a lot, and I think those will be the ones to pursue. The business plan and sustainable model is something we'll work through the year to find out what cost is really involved.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to find municipalities to partner with on that IT grant over the course of the next month.
Through the community compact?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, actually, that was going to be my question, was do you think that there's like future collaboration opportunities when it comes to kind of creating a data standard and intersecting it with this available IT money that's out there, particularly in the community compact, because, obviously, I think over the last, particularly 7 months, 8 months, municipalities particularly have had this like increased technical need, right? When it comes to how we do work remotely and sharing things and stuff like that. So I'm curious if there is that opportunity to kind of elevate standards when municipalities seek funding or seek money, because like I don't want to just speak for my municipality, but like we may not have expertise in those areas, and we're kind of just basing it on like some brochures or pamphlets or salespeople in some cases of what technology to kind of engage with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there are many different areas where standards can make a big role here, and I think we can leverage community compact grant funds or future IT bond bills to spend on things that are more standardized, be that permitting. There's some great standards. There's some around contracting and finance that I think would be really impactful. I think almost each piece of technology can really benefit from that.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions? Mark, I think you wanted to say something. You're on mute though.
Sorry about that, Erin. Thank you.
No, it's fine.
I only want to acknowledge that in addition to the great work being done by Tim and Ryan's team, we also have on the Zoom Margie Weinberger, our chief counsel, who used to run our procurement division, as you know, and still has a big hand and a lot of expertise in that area. And since this project is heavily focused on procurement, Margie has been providing a lot of support and backup and legal assistance. So I want to thank her as well.
And I would just add Mark Fine and his staff are also very involved in this. Brian Luther in the Municipal Collaboration Department is an integral part of the team working on this. So it's a great collaboration between the data services and municipal collaboration teams. And I think it's a very promising initiative. I want to thank Mark for the support through the Executive Discretionary Fund. And by all means, if any of you or your municipalities are interested in talking with us about that Community Compact Grant Program, you know how to get in touch with Ryan, and we'd love to work with you.
Great, thank you so much. If there are no other questions, comments, concerns, you know how to get a hold of them. If not, could Ryan and Tim, could you just drop your emails in the chat function so people can just kind of click on it and reach out right after this meeting if they wish. Thank you. Great, thank you so much. That was really interesting and I think really helpful. So next up on the, thank you, Ryan. So next up on the agenda is the announcement of the fall council meeting. And please get out your outlooks or calendars or whatever, sticky note, whatever you want to do. The date of the next fall council meeting will be Wednesday, November 18th. And that will be a daytime meeting. Heidi, and online, sorry if I didn't stress that enough. It will be in this kind of format, very similar to our annual fall council meeting. Anyone on staff want to say anything else beyond that?
It's going to be a morning meeting on Zoom, just like the last one. We're hoping for good attendance, even though we don't have a vote as consequential as our vote on assessment last time around and our election of officers. Did we do election of officers? Yes, we did election of officers. That's right.
Mark, what time on the 18th?
Do we have a time, Heidi, yet, or are we still working on that? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. We're still going to work on that time. We want to make sure that for the folks who are working from home with kids that we're taking into account, you know, a morning routine and lunch as well. So more will be revealed, but sometime between 9 and 12. So.
Thank you.
Okay. There will be several awards. There will be a number of items of business, and there will be
MPO election reveal.
And there will be, right, although it'll be a little anticlimactic because that needs to be done before the first MPO meeting in November. So that's going to be handled somewhat separately. We are still, MAPC and the T Advisory Board are still running the MPO election, but it will be handled remotely and not directly as part of the MAPC Fall Council meeting. We are still exploring speakers and topics, quite likely related to MetroCommon, not 100% for sure. Obviously, if any of you have suggestions, we are always open to them. I know this meeting is a little later than is usually the case, but for a variety of reasons, I thought the run-up to the election and perhaps the first week or two after the election just didn't seem like a particularly good time to do a council meeting. So we decided to postpone it a little bit.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So stay tuned for more information on that. Next up on the agenda is
Erin, I have a question relative to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Is that not usually the meeting day for our executive committee meeting?
Yes, it is, John. Very good point. I'm going
observant.
I did notice that, but I forgot to mention it. My expectation is to discuss that with the officers at their meeting in October, when it will be possible to have a better sense of what's going on, particularly in the legislature, since we're all sort of thinking, we're hoping that October is going to be budget month, and then we'll make a decision about whether or not to postpone or reschedule or cancel the November 18th meeting. I think it's reasonable to assume we will not have a council meeting followed directly by an executive committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark, there's also a legislative committee meeting scheduled then.
We will deal with that too, Steve.
All the things. I love how everyone's calendar is open though, and seeing the conflicts. That means you're paying attention. So thank you both for that. Okay, anything else on that? Great, more information coming on that as well. The date of our next executive committee meeting will be Wednesday, October 21st. Same bat time, same bat channel, kind of. Yeah, any questions on that? Great. Is there any business not known at the posting of this agenda beyond the presentation from Data Services?
Just one thing, if I may, Aaron. Diego and Kasha and Leah gave a very comprehensive review along with Keith of legislative items, but there was one item that did not make it on their list that I want to discuss and just at least briefly, and that is the issue of police violence and police reform. We have been very actively engaged on that legislative front with detailed comments to both the Senate and the House when they considered their budgets. When they considered their bills, and follow-up of extremely detailed recommendations in regard to conference. That has been on behalf of MAPC, but we have also been working very closely with a team of mayors and managers, pretty much self-selected, who are interested in the issue, including Mayor Curtatone and Mayor Spicer. I know Mayor Spicer is on the line today, and Mayor Curtatone obviously is represented by George. The mayors have on 2 occasions now sent letters which we drafted here on the police issues. The first being their pledge and list of local and state actions. And the second, just a few days ago, a letter signed, I believe, by 14 mayors and managers, encouraging conference to actually get something done and to us. We'd all been hoping that conference would be quick. Even when the legislature decided to extend its session on the 31st of July, we expected and hoped that conference committees would work quickly. But here we are, close to the end of September, mid-September, and no action yet. And we are very concerned on this issue that the resolve to act may weaken. And I want you to know that MAPC and our municipal leaders have been aggressively trying to retain the priority of this issue and encouraging strong action, as well as additional action that we know will be necessary in the upcoming session. I didn't want that to go on me.
Great, thank you. Sandra?
I just had a question about that. So would there be no action? If both the House and Senate passed a bill, do they have to produce a conference?
No, they don't. I think it's still extremely likely that they will. The conference committee is assigned, it's working. I don't think they're going to simply drop the issue. But I'll be frank about my concern. My concern is that the drive to take meaningful action, strong, difficult, controversial action, weakens the longer time goes on. And we don't want to be left with a situation where only a modest bill is passed this year and all the other issues are put off to next year.
Right.
We already know that some of our important issues like arbitration and allowing communities to leave civil service if they so choose without having to get legislative approval, we already know that those issues are not on the docket for this year because they weren't in either bill. But we want to get as much of the very good stuff that was in both the House and Senate bill and in the governor's bill adopted this year, be as far along as possible with this issue so that we can continue to make meaningful progress next year.
Right. So I had asked my state rep, well, so if both bills have meaningful, at least as far as they go, reform, is it possible that they could weaken that? And he said no, especially given that 2 members of the Black and Latino caucus are members of the conference committee. I didn't believe him, frankly, and what you're saying is very concerning.
Well, usually the conference committee will take a position that is in between or at one end of what the House and Senate have put in. That's usually what they do. But if there are differences on any particular issue between the House and the Senate, they don't have to go in the middle. They could do neither of them on any particular issue. I still am hopeful that we are going to get a strong bill. I just do feel that every day that goes by, the pressure to do less gets stronger. And that's my concern.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I announced the date of the next executive committee meeting. Mark gave that short update. Is there anything else? Okay, Seeing none, if I could, I'd love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Everyone's very
second.
excited. Okay, we'll say John DePriest made that motion to adjourn, and Tabor will give you the second on this one. Any questions or comments? Great, thank you. It is roll call again. I'm going to just skip over the people who have had to leave, but if I miss anyone else, apologies. And just come on mute, if you will. Sharonda? Oh, okay, she left. I missed her. Okay, John is not here. Keith?
Aye.
Karen's not here. Adam had to leave. Bob Cohen?
Yes, excellent meeting, Aaron.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Mayor Curtis-Tone's not here. Tom Daniel? John DePriest?
Yes.
Yolanda had to leave. Sandra?
Yes.
Mo?
Yes.
Jared?
Aye.
Tabor?
Yes.
Hayes, I don't think is here. Steve Olenoff?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Vonda and I had to leave. Sam?
Yes.
Steve?
Aye.
Mayor Spicer?
Yes.
Juan?
Yes.
Elaine?
Yes.
Aaron says yes. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting is adjourned at 12:56 p.m. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day, and I will see you all virtually next month.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.